Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. Om Namaste Rudramanyava Utota Ishave Namaha. Namaste Astu Dhanvane Bahubhyam Utate Namaha. Yata Ishu Shivatama Shivam Babhuvate Dhanuhu. Shiva Sharavyaya Tavataya no Rudramridaya. Yate Rudra Shiva Tanura Ghora Papakashini. Taya Nastanuva Shantamaya Girishanta Bhichakashihi. Yamishungiri Shanta Haste Bibhashyastave. Shivangiri Tratang Kurumahi Gumsi Purushan Jagata. Shivena Vachasatva Girishat Chavadamasi. Yathana Sarva Midjagadayakshmagum Sumana Asata. Adhyavocha Dadhivakta Prathamo Daivyo Bhishaka. Ahi Gushcha Sarva Anjambhayan Sarva Ashchayatu Dhanyaha. Asauyastamro Aruna Utababhru Sumangalaha. Ye Chemagum Rudra Abhito Dikshu Shrita Sahasrasho Vaishagum Heda Imahe. Asauyo Vasarpati Nilagrivo Vilohitaha. Utainang Gopa Adrishan Udaharyaha. Utainam Vishva Bhutani Sadrishto Mridayatinaha. Namo Astu Nilagrivaya Sahasrakshaya Midhushe. Athoye Asya Satvano Hante Bhyokaran Namaha. Pramuncha Dhanvanasva Mubhayoratni Yorjyam. Yashchate Hasta Ishavaparata Bhagavo Vapa. Avatat Yadhanustvagum Sahasrakshashate Shudhe. Nishirya Shalyana Mukha Shivona Sumana Bhava. Vijyandanuh Kapardino Visharyo Banavagum Uta. Aneshan Nasyeshava Abhorasya Nishangatihi. Yate Hetermi Dushtamahaste Babhuvate Dhanuhu. Tayasman Vishvatastvamayaksmaya Paribhuja. Namaste Astvayudhaya Natataya Drishnave. Ubhabhyam Mutate Namo Bahubhyam Tavatanvane. Parite Dhanvano Hete Rasman Vrinaktu Vishvataha. Athoya Ishudhistavare Asmannidhe Hitam.
Namaskar. The chanting today was by Claudette Evans from the United States of America. She has learned chanting from Shantala Sriramaya, a student of Veda Pandit Sri Chalakere brothers. Srimati Shantala Sriramaya has been kind enough to get all her students to record for us, and her students are from all over the world. So I must say that's a wonderful soft power of India that has spread across the world, where they're all learning Vedic chanting very seriously. Swagatam and welcome to all our esteemed speakers, guests and audiences from around the world to our annual event, Namaste 2021, a global Utsava of Indian soft power, brought to you by the Center for Soft Power, an arm of Indic Academy, in collaboration with the ICCR. Today, this is our fifth session, Art on the Global Stage, Universal Aesthetics of Natyashastra. I remember a paragraph from Swami Dayananda Saraswati's book, where he said, all life and art in India or with Indians is divinity-centered. The content of all music and dance in India is mostly themed around gods, goddesses, and the spiritual. Same with our traditional arts too. Hence, the pursuit of art should be life-changing. And I think that's what we're all about to discuss, about the aesthetics of the Natyashastra, which is rather universal in nature, but nurtured and grown from this land and this soil. I would like to welcome today a very special guest, the ambassador.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
She's unable to join because of some pressing matters.
Okay, so then we will go on to introducing our moderator for today, our speaker and moderator for today, Sri Prakash Belwadi. I should say that he's like a younger brother to me, and he is an actor, a director, a theater person. He is not only somebody of the contemporary world, but has gone into and also studied a lot of our Shastric knowledge. So I think he's very apt to be a moderator today, and he takes whatever he does very, very seriously. And as to his official, since somebody else was supposed to do that, he's also the managing trustee and founder of Center for Film and Drama, which produces stage plays, conducts courses on filmmaking and acting. And he recently did a 9-hour production with several stages, which was simply amazing, received very well in Mysore. And I hope that, this COVID situation will improve and he can do it, in the rest of the country. So over to you, Prakash. You can start with your opening remarks and then we will go on to the rest of the speakers. And before I hand it over to Prakash, I must say that we are very honored to have such seniors like Paddu Akka, who is literally like an Akka to me, and Guru Gopal Venu, and the rest of our second part of the panel who have been so enthusiastic from across the world. Thank you all and welcome again to all our speakers and our viewers from across the world. So thank you very much, Prakash, over to you.
Thank you, Vijayaka. Good evening, everybody. I must mention right away that I have met Dr. Padma Subramaniam and Dr. and Guru Gopal Venu on different occasions. I don't know whether they'll remember, but I'll try to jog their memory. I met Dr. Subramaniam in Nandini Alva's house once. We had a very interesting conversation where I told her that the quarrels between the Kannada culture and Tamil culture were completely artificial and modern day. And I said that the temples in Badami and Aihole were actually built by Tamil sthapatis. Because, after a conquest, when the Raja of the time took his wives to the temples and said, what do you want to take as loot? They looked at the architecture of the temple and said, we should take the sthapatis from here so that they can build temples like this for us in our kingdom. And she was very moved by that. And she said we should write a story that she could perform. But unfortunately, that never happened. I was actually the translator come moderator in some way for a 3-day theater festival in Karnataka. And I met, Guru Gopal Venu, who made a presentation there, Pratyakshike, as we called it. And he also performed with his troupe, with Kapila, part of the Shakuntalam. And it was just outstanding. I was most struck by one idea that there is a continuum of a tradition from the time of the Natyashastra. I'm saying 1,000 years, perhaps before Abhinava Gupta, and that it was extant in a small part of India, in Kerala, with such clarity. I don't want to use the word purity, but with such clarity and in such fine in form that any Indian must think that this continuity is what India is, or what Bharat is. There's one more thing I want to say as at the opening. I once curated a seminar for a theatre festival in Bangalore in 2011. And Dr. Hannah Dibbrun from Germany, who does some work with the Terukutu troupe in Kanchipuram, she was there, and we were talking about what is Margi and what is Marga and what is Desi, what is folk, what is traditional, what is contemporary, what is ancient kind of thing, and mainly what is mainstream and what is slipstream, if you wish. And then she said, I don't even understand the terminology that's being used in this seminar. She said that in this auditorium, which can perhaps seat 350 people, this was at the Rangashankara, she said, we are talking as though this is mainstream, and the 500,000 villages in India where every day the performances, you talk as though that is the other. Actually, you are the other, and that is the mainstream of India, she said. I think it's very important to remember that. We should also remember that these were art forms that have existed in the idea of Bharat, with the idea of Bharat, before the idea of the nation state, which is really like post-medieval, just now kind of idea. And to actually debate India and its aesthetics, or its sense of aesthetics, in terms of what it means today, in today's terms of reference, would be an injustice. Somebody did a debate a few years ago. You all remember that whether India was put together by the British and India didn't exist before that. And somebody made a joke and said, what do you think Columbus went about to discover? And I don't think changing the label changes anything. There was an idea of Bharat. You can call it cultural or anything else, but there was an idea of Bharat that preceded the idea of India by many thousands of years. And actually, these are art forms and ideas and tattvas that have existed from that time, that have been extant, thankfully, from that time. I start with these opening remarks to briefly come to the idea of rasa. I am not a scholar like Dr. Padma Subramaniam. Actually, I'm not a performer of her quality also. The thing is that I am a practitioner of modern theater, and after many years of struggling to find what my kind of theater means, I stumbled upon the idea of Natyashastra, strangely, about 15 years ago. And I discovered that all this struggle was inevitable for people like me because we never had a grounding in the Natyashastra tradition or the tattvas of the Natyashastra. It's important to remember that in the Indian way of thinking, or the Indic way of thinking, there is no separation from tattva and forms of performance, indeed, forms of any kind of practice. The Natyashastra itself, as told to us by Abhinava Gupta, we don't know in what all forms it existed before and what all arguments and versions of it were there before. Everything we know is because of what Abhinava Gupta has said, in the 10th century. When Abhinava Gupta talks about it, he quotes several arguments and several authors, and from that we must deduce, what Bharata Muni intended with it. I think the stories behind the Natyashastra themselves are very charming and very meaningful, and as is normal in India, full of metaphor. And Abhinavagupta details the Natyashastra itself as parallels of his idea of the Shiva Sukta. So I think it's very interesting to see that there is no separation between a philosophical ground and a grammar or understanding of performance itself. Briefly, before I conclude, I want to talk about the idea of rasa itself. I would argue that the word is untranslatable. It's an introduced word, and it is specific to the Natyashastra, and it must be understood in the context of the Natyashastra, because what rasa does is, there are purists of rasa theory who will say that cinema, for instance, cannot produce rasa because it comes as a recorded medium. It does not take into account the reaction of an audience in the shared time space. The shared time space of the audience in cinema or the visual medium is of a recorded thing that has happened sometime, and all that is shared is the time of performance or the time of narrative that is shared, in a place by the audience. But for a rasa to happen, why it becomes sacred is that you have to bring your bodies to the performance, whether you're a member of the audience or you're a member of the performing side. You have to bring your bodies to that shared performance time space, and then the experience must be created there, and then a visarjana should happen at the end of it. You must dissolve the performance there. Everybody reverts to who they were, after the show, and there is no takeaway from it that is tangible. All that happens is that you're left with an aesthetic that hopefully that you carry with you for the rest of your life. This is the idea of rasa, and it is unique to the aesthetics of the Natyashastra. There is one more thing about it that is also unique, and there is no accident that the word play is used both for performance as well as for sport, because there's a kind of role play in sports also. If when as the song goes, Simon and Garfunkel sing, "Where are you, Joe DiMaggio? A nation, turns its lonely heart to you." But the thing is, even in performance, you feel if a nation's spirit could be lifted because of a performance by a player, it's because of role play, because what the game signifies is character. When you call, say, an Indian cricket player like, say, Rahul Dravid, the wall, it's the character that you're referring to. And when an umpire lifts a finger and a nation holds its breath, whether he's out or not, till he holds that finger, it's actually not any grievance or lament about what fate befalls him on the cricket ground. You just translate that to feeling of winning or losing in your own life. It becomes an aesthetic at the moment. Again, I would say that the idea of this performance in a cricket ground, where the audience is there, where the spectators are there along with the players, is very different from the recorded medium, where you show a fragmented reality of the game. It may seem clearer to you, but the thing is, the shared experience is not there. It's what the spectators are doing on the ground that influences the players' ability to play, or the mood to play, or the way he or she actually accepts the challenge of playing. Even in Kannada, we use the word ata for a performance. I'm sure it must be there. It must be so in several Indian languages. The other thing about the Natyashastra's idea of rasa is that this idea of the willing suspension of disbelief that you carry from the world of literary theory actually to the idea of performance, it's a little different in the Natyashastra's idea of the performed thing. The Natyashastra itself does not make any major significant difference between performance in just body, performance of voice, or performance combined. It does not make a distinction. In the Natyashastra's idea of rasa, what happens is at any moment in the performance, say a sutradhar, somebody who actually moderates or conducts the play itself, can address the actor as an actor and not as the character, and sometimes can address the character as character and question why somebody did something that the character did. Like, why did you send your wife in that state to the forest? He can ask the actor playing, Rama. Here, what the Sutradhar is doing is he is saying this person is Rama, but he's interrupting the performance and asking a question which allows for an intellectual argument to be done by the character at the moment. And it is possible that the character himself at that moment, whether played by a man or a woman, at that moment can continue in the emotional state of the character at that moment in the narrative, or just drop it and then say, if I was given a chance, I would have done it differently, but that time I did it like that, he could say. There are all forms of alienation from character that the actor could do. That is allowed in the Natyashastra, and yet, there is no rasa bhanga. That means like the power of narrative that is built as aesthetic, as an aesthetic in the audience is unbroken if managed with great skill. The Kudiyatam is a great example of this, that, that somebody just recites in the background, a verse from the original text in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit drama, the moment you speak, it becomes Prakrit, because speech, tone, timbre, gesture, character actually gives it idiomatic, lokadharmi value, and it loses its Sanskritness, which is to be not Prakrit but Sanskrit, is that it is pure, it is free of idiom. The moment you speak it, it becomes Prakrit. Some people say. I think all these ideas are fascinating. I'm just touching on various points here before I conclude on the idea of rasa. And in the Kudiyatam, after that happens, you can get these extraordinary performers, to hold a moment. I mean, when she says, for instance, I am Shakuntala, we had been together, I'm to be taken as your wife, to live with you. And, he cannot remember because of the curse. A bee buzzes and he remembers. He asks himself, is it possible that things that have not happened to you, even these could haunt you with the emotion or trouble or anxiety of any real event that has happened? And this actually is a thought inside his head, and that thought is performed pure visual, just movement. There is no background narration. The actor does not speak. It is just performed, and it may take this moment that I just spoke about, could happen over 2.5 hours, and you'll just sit there spellbound. And this is possible because of rasa. And rasa happens as abhivyakti in the audience. It is the viewer who actually experiences rasa, because the actors can finish the performance. They could be crying, the bodies could be trembling, but they could just go to the wings and just hug each other or give high fives because of the performance. But that is not that is not the feeling that is generated in the audience. I'll finish with this question. Supposing there are two actors, extraordinary actors who are performing on stage, whether it's dance, drama, or if a piece from the Kudiyatam, or it's a modern theater. Let's say there's a performance on stage by two extraordinary actors, a man and a woman in love. Because of a misunderstanding, they're going to part now. And the audience holds its breath because they love these people. They believe in the chemistry between these characters, and they want them to be together. They want the misunderstanding to be resolved. But it doesn't get resolved. And let's say they tell things to each other that bring tears, or all the all the satvika abhinaya happens between them. They sweat, they cry, they lose, the faces become pale, or they blush, or whatever, they shiver, the voice becomes hoarse. All this happens, let us say, because with extraordinary skill of the actors, all this happens. And the audience is crying. When the lights go down or the curtain closes, whose pain is this? And the idea of rasa is that it is pain indeed, and it's pain felt by the viewer, but that is not the pain of reality. It may have happened in their lives, but when they cry because of what has happened to them in their real lives, it's just experience. But when they cry by watching a performance and they feel this experience, then it's an aesthetic. And that is what briefly, or I would say in my terms, crudely, we call rasa. And I just offer this as provocation. There are great scholars there, especially Dr. Subramaniam is there, and she can elaborate on this. She can correct me where I'm wrong. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share space with such luminaries. Thank you, Vijayaka. Over to you.
Thank you, Prakash ji, for your opening remarks and for having set the tone for this evening's session. I'm now very pleased to introduce Dr. Padma Subramaniam. Dr. Padma Subramaniam is an Indian classical dancer and a Padma Bhushan awardee. A daughter of Indian film director Shri K. Subramaniam, she was trained by the legend Vallavur V. Ramaya Pillai. She holds a doctorate degree and has traveled extensively and has delivered lectures in various universities across Southeast Asia. She's acclaimed as a rare combination of a dancer, research scholar, choreographer, music composer, teacher, and Indologist, and one of the most outstanding artists of today. Welcome, Dr. Padma. With that, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
My dear sister, Vijay Lakshmi Vijay Kumar, all the great scholars and artists who have assembled here for this very interesting and meaningful webinar. I want to first thank all the nice words that my dear Vijay, Varsha, and Dr. Belwadi spoke about me. I'm going to just give you a bird's eye view of what Natyashastra says about rasa, how it explains rasa. So it's an ocean. I will give you a teaspoon of material from this ocean because I want to stick to the time that Vijay has given me. Hence, I made a prepared speech to make sure that I don't exceed. Well, the Sanskrit term for aesthetics is alankara, which implies poetics. It is a concept of beauty impregnated in the content of literature, drama, music, and dance. Bharata's Natyashastra is the earliest extant literature on this subject. It is the science of the art of Natya, that is drama. The greatest contribution of Natyashastra is the rasa theory, which had influenced the entire world of literature and arts. Natyashastra is so encyclopedic in its content that its strong cultural imprint is still seen just not all over India, but I would say all over Southeast Asia. Well, I wanted to inform our Indian ambassador for Cambodia that I've had very useful and meaningful long discussion with Her Highness Bhufa Devi. And I was so amazed to see the mask of Bharata Muni in the museums and all the dance schools in Cambodia and also Thailand. So this Natyashastra is something which has been taken out of India along with Ramayana and Mahabharata. In fact, in Cambodia, the dances came to be referred to as Apsara dance because of the present princess starting to dance. Well, coming to the rasa theory of Natyashastra, Bharata says, Nahi rasa dhrite kinjit apyartha pravartate. That is, no poetic meaning will proceed without rasa. Rasa can be simply explained as the soulful experience of being exposed to beauty in literature and arts. The one who experiences this enjoyment is the rasika. Creation of rasa is the ultimate goal of any art. For this, the first step is the expression of the content. Expression is termed as abhinaya because the content of the poem or action is drawn towards the reader or spectator. It has to be replete with feeling, which is termed bhava. It is called bhava because it makes one feel, bhavayanti. It infuses or penetrates the meaning of the play through the enactment in the modes of physical, verbal, and emotional expressions. Bharata defines the process of creation of rasa in a sutra, in just one small sutra. It's almost like a formula, but it contains so much of profound knowledge into it. Vibhava, Anubhava, Vyabhichari, Samyogat, Rasa Nishpatti. That is the combination of causes, effects, and fleeting emotions produces rasa. Now, Vibhava is the cause, Anubhava is the effect, and fleeting emotions of impermanent nature is Vyabhichari Bhava. The durable psychological states of mind are only 8, according to Bharata. These have a more steady status in the minds of the characters and situations around which plays and poems are written. These are called sthayi bhavas. And as I said, they are 8 in number. The vyabhicharis or fleeting emotions are 33 in number. The vibhava, that is the causes, and their corresponding effects, anubhavas, are varied. And in fact, there are plenty depending on the scenes portrayed. It is called anubhava because it is anubhavayanti. That is, makes one feel after being exposed to the cause. The consequent words, gestures, and sattva are called anubhava. Sattvika conditions are also 8. They are stambhana, stupor, sweda, perspiration, romancha, horripilation, swarasada, change in voice, kampana, trembling, vaivargya, change of color, ashru, tears, and pralaya, fainting. These are physiological reactions to intense psychological factors. It is from Sthayi Bhava only that rasa is born. Bharata says that, quote, just as a king is superior to other men and the guru is superior to the sishyas, Sthayi Bhava is superior to other bhavas. Like how the king with numerous attendants receives the epithet and not others, Sthayi Bhava alone attains rasa, unquote. Bharata speaks of 8 rasas born out of 8 Sthayi Bhavas. Rati is love, leading to Shringara, Shringara rasa. Hasa is laughter, leading to Hasya rasa. Shoka, meaning sorrow, leads to Karuna rasa. Krodha, that is anger, leads to Raudra rasa. Utsaha is inspired energy. This leads to Veera rasa. Bhaya is terror, which leads to Bhayanaka rasa. Jugupsa is disgust, leading to Bibhatsa rasa. And Vismaya, this is wonder, leading to Adbhuta rasa. Some editions of Natyashastra add the 9th rasa, namely Shanti, which means tranquility. We'll come to that later. Each of the rasas have relevant vibhavas, anubhavas, and vyabhichari bhavas. Like how a well-disposed person can taste the food prepared by combining ingredients in correct proportion and enjoy the same, the rasikas can enjoy the taste of the combination of all the right bhavas leading to any particular rasa. The cook is not me. The cook is Bharata himself. This is what he mentions. This theory of rasa helps an appreciation of any good artistic production in the world. I would include cinema also in this, though Dr. Belwadi said, he opines differently, or he was quoting somebody else. Abhinav Gupta, the Kashmirian commentator who lived about 1,000 years ago, elevated the theory of rasa to a philosophical level by proving that though by analysis the rasas are numbered as 8 or 9, in reality it is only 1. Any rasa, including that which is horrifying or saddening, lead to a pleasant experience which is beyond the physical level. It is nothing but universalization of the art experience, which is equal to spiritual bliss. This philosophy of aesthetics is already existing in Vedic literature. The Upanishad says, Raso Vaisaha. That is, rasa is the universal Brahman. It is ananda or bliss, which is caused by a journey into the Atman, that is soul. Even among the 1,000 names of our universal mother, Lalitamba, there are two epithets relevant to quote here. Rasagnya, that is, she is the epitome of the awareness of rasa. And Rasa Shevadi, that is, she herself is the ocean of rasa. Natyashastra was created by Brahma to educate and entertain and therefore elevate. This is the philosophy of Indian aesthetics, which is soft but very powerful to tame human understanding of culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subramaniam. Those were enlightening words. Definitely a lot to think about and reflect. And with that, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Tiziana Barbero, who was born in Italy. She got acquainted with the Teatro Tascabile de Bergamo and joined it in 1978. Had the honor of being trained by the founder director himself. Tiziana is also a trained Odissi dancer, practicing the dance for over 40 years under the guidance of the famous guru Aloka Panikar. She danced in all her performances produced at TTB, Teatro, I'm sorry, pardon my pronunciation, Teatro Tascabile de Bergamo. And she, since 2016, she's also been the artistic director of Agdi Art. Tiziana, welcome. We are glad to have you with us. Over to you.
Well, good evening to everybody. Let me say that I'm very honored to be here today. First of all, I would like to say that I am not a scholar and that my knowledge of Natyashastra is more related to the practical aspect of those who do theater rather than those who study theater. The second thing I would like to say is that people generally think of colonialism as a one-way street, going from the west to the east. People tend to ignore that Europe have been greatly influenced by the values of Asia. And people tend to ignore that the influence of Asian artistic forms have radically changed Western thought, especially with regard to theater. In fact, we can say that throughout the 20th century, Asia had a pervasive influence on the great reformers of European theater, from Stanislavski to Meyerhold, Artaud, and on to Grotowski, Jerzy Grotowski, Ariane Mushkin, Eugenio Barba. People of theater who, of Western theater, who searched for alternatives to the Western vision in which the value of the theater lay essentially in the word, as well as that of the actor in his ability to interpret it. So these tensions toward Asia and the research of the 20th century European theater masters gave rise to numerous very different and very important experiences. Teatro Tascabile, the theater where I belong, met India and were actually colonized by it in 1977. At the time, we were a young theater group hungry for techniques, techniques that could show us an alternative way to the traditional European theater, which at that time seemed to us to have lost its lifeblood. But we didn't want to start from zero, as if the theater hadn't already existed before us. And so we decided to go and learn the art of theater from the most prepared masters on the art, And we left for India to look for, in the practice of Natyashastra, to look for the answer to our urgent questions. For us, Indian dance theater was not an exotic fascination, so widespread in the West at that time. It was instead a slow and constant assimilation of a culture different from ours. And to absorb a culture different from yours, it takes a long time. It takes decades of work. And it takes a lot of dedication, humility, and a sort of a total reverence towards whom we have elected as guide and teacher. Now, after more than 45 years, we are a theater that lives in two worlds and trying to find a valid synthesis for the specific micro tradition of our group. So now I would like to go on the topic of the meeting, the aesthetic of Natyashastra, but read through the eyes of a Western theater group. The subject is really very, very vast. That's why today I try to limit the field and to briefly touch the aspect of Angika Abhinaya. So looking for a point of union and a synthesis between the codified techniques of Indian theater and the Western research theater context to which we belong, our founder, Renzo Vescovi, translated the Indian concept of Nata with lyrical actor. That means a sort of close relationship between body and spirit of the actor. A relationship that emphasizes the psychophysical energy of the actor, that makes the art of theater dominated by emotions rather than reality. So the expressive way of the lyrical actor is mainly the body. And therefore we have, of course, metaphorically translated the Indian concept of Angika Abhinaya as orchestra body. But to explain a little, within the complexity of the orchestral sound, there are sounds of different instruments, each with its own independent melodic line. And the fact that someone plays doesn't mean that someone else doesn't play. In practice in the theater, this happens through the identification of different segments of the body in which, for example, in the same unit of time, physical actions are organized according to an orchestral logic. So the spectator attends a sort of visual concert. Perhaps this is what the Indian tradition expresses as Dishakyavya. Indeed, the spectator's perception of the lyrical actor is synesthetic, involves body and mind. And all of this meets and translates the precious teaching of Indian theater. So now, before closing, I would like to show a fragment of one of our performances in which the four parts of Abhinaya are expressed, as I hope, in a clear way. The performance is named Red Angelic Dance for a Light Traveler. The scene you see represents an old man seeing a young self through the eyes of an imminent death. He sees a young, idealistic, revolutionary that he always betrayed throughout his life. The scene you will see is built on a rhythmic base where the body and the voice of the actors are subjected to the rhythm. And the result we wanted to obtain is a sort of concert of sensorial stimuli that could give back to the spectator, when the performance is seen live, two fundamental emotions: anger and compassion, Raudra and Karuna. So now I ask the direction to please send the video. At the end of it, I will briefly close this speech of mine.
Bhutiji, Srinivasji, can we have the video, please?
So we sent the video, but if any problem is there, we can now my colleague can send it.
I think
Yeah, can you please share from your side, please?
Okay. Okay. Dopo.
You'll have to unmute yourself for us to listen to the audio.
So, to close, when we left for India in 78, we were looking for techniques, but we didn't know that we would meet much more than techniques, and that India would have become for us a second motherland to which we would constantly return, and that the meeting with our gurus would have changed our life forever. From India, we have also learned that in theater, ethic is a fundamental part of aesthetic. We learned it through the rules and the values of Guru Shishya Parampara, and through the concept, perhaps even in India today more ideal than real, but we learned that the value of the artistic work lies in the work itself and not in the person who does the artistic work. But perhaps we can talk about this topic on another occasion. So thanks to everybody for the patience.
Thank you, Ms. Tiziana. Very interesting. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Sri Guru Gopal Venu. He is a performer, researcher, and has invented dance notation system for delineating mudra in dance and theatre in Kerala. He has also devised Navrasa Sadhana module as a transformative process for artists seeking a deeper insight into the depths and diversity of human emotions. He's the chairman of Natana Kerali, and also he's been a performer of the troupe Kutiyatam and has toured to countries like France, England, Holland, Switzerland, Japan, Sweden, Denmark, and more. Welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Respected Pradha, Rashi, Srimati Jayalakshmi, and all the great scholars. Could you please show my video just now? Is it ready? The second one also can be played. Thank you. So, I am from the practitioners of Viatam. Already everybody has explained about it, so I'm not going into.
Sir, can you just come a little closer? You're not that audible.
I was associated with the World Theatre Project for 3 years, based in Sweden, from 1999 onward. So one of the first attempts was to find out whether any written material on theatre, ancient treatises or anything available in any of the cultures. From the West, we found a slim volume, Aristotle's Poetics. Then we had several visits to China, but nothing was available because with the help of Mr. Marquet of the Beijing Opera director, nothing was available in China as a written material about any of the theatrical performance. Then from Japan, the 14th century treatise by Ziemi, the master of no theatre, that is Fushikaden, the treatise written by Ziemi. It's also, when it is translated and printed, around 300 pages. No other material available in any part of the world about the ancient theatrical styles of those countries. Then I realized how rich is India. We have 6,000 verses dedicated to theatre. That's a major text. Like Paduga once mentioned, I was so happy. She said very boldly that Natyashastra is 5,000 years old. I always quote this. I believe in it. It's very, very ancient. And this is the major text. Then we have all the regional areas where artists flourished. We have Natyashastras in the regional languages. Sanskrit also many other material available. And in addition to that, Kudiyattam like art forms, Kramadivika, the production manuals, Atapragaram, the active manuals, hundreds of such things are here. This shows how serious they are about theatre. I just wanted to, because time is very limited, to elaborate the same sutra which Padmaji has recited here. Vibhava anubhava vibhijari samyoga prasanishpa. My whole life is dedicated based on this. My whole artistic activity is based on this. Vibhava, usually from a play or imagination. If you take the play writing in India, the pioneer playwright was Phasa. Phasa is definitely before Kalidas. We do not know exactly his period of time, but I can say one thing with my understanding of world theatre. He is the father of world theatre, writing, playwriting. I don't think any other culture has a playwright who is as ancient as possible, and all his material are available. 13 plays have been found in the Kuriyatam families of Kerala, family manuscripts. It is not collected from oral tradition. Written materials are available. So Bhasa to be considered as a personality of the world theatre, the pioneer playwright, the father of playwriting in theatre. Then Anubhava. Angika, Vachika, and Satika Vinaya, when expressed, that is Anubhava. If we take Angika, I was, from the age of 19 years, I am notating all the hand gestures of Kerala, art forms like Kathakali, Kuriyatam, and Mohiniyattam. Several years I worked on it. It comes to 2,000 variations of hand gestures, only in Kerala. Then think about other part of India, other forms of dances. Angika is so elaborate, it's a whole universe, different. Then comes to Satika. Satika is, all the feelings. And you need only through the subtle body you can have the 5 senses coming into your support of acting. It's very, Bharata don't say all these things, but he is very, very cleverly. To achieve the prasanna mukharagam, you have to activate your 5 senses, otherwise it's impossible. So he knew all these things, but he kept it very intangible, very secret, hidden in his. Then he said, Swabhavigam, Prasannam, Rakudam, Shyamam. Breath is involved. Without breath, you cannot achieve any of these, especially Prasannam and Rakudam. Then comes to Vibhijari. Actually, I was asking all the Natyashastra scholars, right from Varanasi to the Kerala, the great scholar who translated Natyashastra into Malayalam is K.P. Namaste2021. They were very, very close, and he is my guru. I asked him also, how can we treat Vibhijari bhavas? Because it's so much, it gives so much possibility for actor training. Just if you take the first Vibhijari bhava in the Veda, as Padaka said, the anubhavas, the experience, given with Nirveda is that Daridryam, the first poverty, Vyadhi, severe illness, Avamanam, insulting, Adikshevam, accusing, Akroshanam, shouting, Tadanam, physically assaulting, and Ishtajanag Yogam, somebody very dear, very close, already passed away. And then comes Tattva-jnana. So, as an experiment, I started doing all these things. Not as my own Kuriyatam performance, but as an improvisation outside. Daridryam, Vyadhi, all this experience. Great change in my involvement, great change. So just think about 500 odd such anubhavas are given by Bharata. What else do you want for an actor training? I don't think any other technique of actor training in the whole world, because I'm a little bit general understanding I had with Stanislavski and until Jerzy Grotowski, Antony Northwood, but I never found anything as realistic as Bharata. And as powerful, because some of the Vibhijari bhavas have plans. I remember Jerzy Grotowski said in his last days, he sent a group to our institution, the Paratheatrical group. Their main idea was to find out the secret of trance. It's such a wonderful exercise. What was given that? And then Madam, intoxicated without alcohol. Without alcohol, you get intoxicated. And my experience is wonderful exercise. After doing one Madam, even some of the very professional dancers, they say it helps even more involvement, bringing more involvement even to Sundaram. So Haridas Vyabhijari Bhavas are the best actor training exercise ever mentioned in any other actor training methodology in the whole world. When I was teaching some of this material, somebody who is doing research on Michael Chekhov's system, he said, "This is Chekhov." I said, "It's not Chekhov." I don't know anything about Chekhov. I said, "This is the Vyabhijari Bhavas of the Natyashastra." Those based, one word, like Nirveda can be the Sthayi Bhava of Shantam. I have a practical experience of how to bring Shantam just only Nirveda. But that's not included Shantam, but he has put Nirveda as the first Vyabhijari Bhava. So these are the Indian system which can be of theatrical practice for the whole world. One sutra is enough. And then comes, I want to tell you also, in Kerala, in Kodungallur is just near the Thrissur district. From my place, it is only 21 kilometers. There exists an actor training methodology for 3 generations until the beginning of 4 decades of the 20th century. Same period of Stanislavski and all. It was Bhagavata Kunjani Tambaran who was the last exponent. They were teaching an active methodology based, they say, Suravayu. Actor training system, Suravayu. Sura means the sound of your breath. So, and Navarasa is the main methodology they have adopted. They teach only that. It's a full-fledged training. Full-fledged training. And Guru Amanand Madhusekar, my guru in Kuriyattam, he was trained there. Patikandri Ravandiman, the great Kathakali master, trained there. They go there after their traditional training. So there, the Navarasa, the Saravayu, the term is not in Natyashastra. But they don't mind. They developed a very independent methodology, a full-fledged actor training system based on just Navarasa. There is so much to say and so much to experience. I have developed a Navarasa sadhana training based on all these things. I'm not a scholar, but my approach is practical, and it found very, very useful. I think the time doesn't permit me to go on like that. So, thank you so much.
Prakash?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi. Hello.
So you can have a few minutes to ask any questions or have a discussion with both of them.
I have a question. To both Dr. Padma and Guru Venu. See, in the Kuriyattam, for instance, the performance is done to a single point, which is the Jyoti at the edge of the performing space. No, of course, there's a lot of philosophy involved with that, because, you know, in the idea of ancient drama, you know, a performance is also a yagna. You know, so you bring focus to it. The other aspect is, I'm very curious to know how in their traditions or in their training or performance methodologies, these extraordinary practitioners have incorporated the ideas of Natyashastra in this one respect, which is, what is the relationship of the actor with the character? I mean, sometimes you know that, let us say, a board on the stage is weak, and if you step on it, you know, it'll make a creaking sound, and you know, you're aware of that. Or, you know, if a light has gone off, you need to move into some other light. So you have a very practical consciousness working. So sometimes you might have to come and stand at a place on stage where the tear is visible or the eye is visible. You need to catch light like that. But you're also at the same point in these cold calculations, you're also at the same point able to generate emotion for Satvika Abhinaya. How does this happen? How do these both states of mind work, that you play the character with character's emotion, but you're the actor, completely practical here and now? How does that happen? I'm very curious.
Paduka.
Paduka, unmute.
Can't hear.
Unmute all enno.
No?
Yes.
No?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, now we can hear
Okay,
you.
okay.
It's a wonderful question, Dr. Belwadi.
I must make one correction. I'm not a PhD. I'm just Prakash Belwadi.
That doesn't matter. We'll call you Dr. Belwadi. For your stature, your experience in both cinema and theater, you deserve honorary doctorates, not one. This was a very pertinent question. I'm sure Venuji also will have a very interesting answer. I'm basically an artist. I happen to be studying Natyashastra. So my life's ambition was to bridge the gap between theory and practice, which I found as a teenager. I found when I started studying on my own, I found there was a gap. Lakshana Lakshya Viruddham was there. But basically, as I said, I am an artist. In fact, to be honest with you, an artist is somebody, even if you go through the entire Shastric knowledge that is available, like how the whole body is trained to be forgotten about, I think what is necessary for a practical artist is, don't think of the lakshanas, think of the character. That's most important. And if I had done Krishnaya Tubhyam Namaha or Ramaya Tubhyam Namaha, I remember Venuji brought his guru. Chakyar was there for my Ramaya Tubhyam Namaha. He came and asked me, how did you do Nirvahanam, which is only in Kudiyatam. Nirvahanam is something like a flashback. For a film director, this is what I can say. He was asking me, how did you do that? Did you study or see Kudiyatam? I had never seen Kudiyatam. It came to me, it came from within me. As Rama, I stand, and it's a solo Ramayana, mind you. And Rama and Sita, they just meet together after the Agni Praveshana of Sita. And I was thinking like Sita, I was thinking myself to be Rama. And that is what brought that flashback Nirvahanam on the stage. So there is no question of going into Shastric notes. Abhinaya, I think, if I can put it in a capsule form, Abhinaya is internalizing something which is external. And after internalizing, you have to externalize it for people to understand. And in this process, sometimes for a mono acting sort of Banika style that I did for Krishnaya Tubhyam Namaha, Ramaya Tubhyam Namaha, in split second, there has to be change of character. It need not be like, youngsters are now making a reel. They go around and they think it's a different character. It's not that. By the mere look, you change the character. So that has to be very important. I think Bharata calls it avivesha, where a character enters. And at the same time, an actor cannot forget the surrounding, as you rightly said. It is very important. Otherwise, in a scene like Kichakavadam or Narasimha Swami tearing the intestine of Hiranyakashipu, it will really happen. It happened in Bhagavata Mela. In traditional Bhagavata Mela, some 100 years ago, this happened because he was possessed. And two brothers were acting as Hiranya and Narasimha Swami. And he really teared open the stomach. So you have to be in it and yet out of it. If Buddha could have 80 layers of consciousness, an actor has to definitely develop different layers of consciousness inside himself. And only then you can manage to go somewhere near perfection.
Venuji?
May I share? Yeah. I would like to share with you a traditional concept of acting in Kudiyattam. That is the individual actor character. Individual is getting all the training and who does homework, everything. But for acting, he creates an actor from himself. When he bends at the knee and his spine, bottom of the spine, the waist is energized. When energy is produced and a non-human posture is taken place. That is, he is preparing an actor from himself. Then the actor say in his mind on several occasions, at that time, in Malayalam it is Asamayathingal Ravana. Then once Ravana is finished, then again say Asamayathingal Sita or Asamayathingal Shiva, Asamayathingal Parvati. Any character you can say inside. This, at that time, is considered to be the best clue for changing. So individual actor character. So the entire Natyadharmi language, right from Mudra to Abhinaya to Netravinaya and all sort of things, it is the language of the actor. And he is narrating the story, the entire story. He is the connection between the spectator and performer. He will have to narrate. He take the character. So he will have to play two roles. One is projecting the character, and at the same time, he shows his abhinaya to the spectator. So involving and showing. So actor should be very careful. in dealing with this. This is a traditional concept. And I saw this in my Guruji, Amanur Madhachakya. In the early days, he never accept curtain call. He never accept even people come after the performance, oh, how great. He never bothered. So one day I asked him, it is too much, it is very unpolite that if you don't respond to it. And he said, I have not done anything. I have not done at all. He said, very simple, very pure and sincere person. I have not done anything, so how can I take the credit? So his actor only did it. Actually, it's finished when he reached the green room. So this is the Indian concept of acting. And regarding the Satvika Bhavas, I believe Bharata has cleverly given all facilities. He never say how to train Satvika Bhavas. May I correct, Padmaji? He never say. But how to achieve it? Achieve it only with the Vijari Bhavas. The Vijari Bhavas not to be written down in the notebook. It should be experienced. And I have taught something like more than 900 actors in various fields. And I found that tears are coming, and poor, absolutely dull people, tears coming, horripilation coming after some time, because the experience makes them to produce. That is Bharata's technique. Like Mukharyaga, he never said breath to be used. But without breath, how can you bring Rakadam? So many things like that. Without breath, without the five senses, many people said he never said about the five senses. But without five senses, he knew very well. Prasadhanam can be achieved only with the five senses. So this is the traditional concept. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vijayaka, back to you.
Thank you so much, Prakash. We had a lovely first session. Now we move on to our second session. I would like to just talk about World Sanskrit Day, which is being celebrated in India every time on the full moon day in the month of Shravan. Tomorrow is World Sanskrit Day, and it is very significant that today we are discussing a treatise written in this beautiful language. And the one common thread which runs through India's varied and rich cultural heritage are her ancient treatises, of which Natyashastra has had major influences outside India. Indian scholars say experiencing rasa is a great human element, and according to Indian classical dances and theatrics, it is not common to all. In a story like the Ramayana, for instance, when Rama and Sita were separated, some people experience sorrow and have tears in their eyes, while others may not be moved by the emotions expressed on the stage. Indian aestheticians have given the term Sahridaya, which may be translated as of common heart. Etymologically, the word Sahridaya means one who has the same wavelength in sharing the emotions of the poet or the author in experiencing the sentiments. That is perhaps the reason, as all our panelists have mentioned, why irrespective of the language or the music or the expression, people across the globe enjoy the Indian performing arts. This is a very sensitive component of every culture to feel the pain or pleasure of fellow human beings. And aesthetics has no geographical or linguistic barriers, as the panelists in the coming 1 hour will elaborate. We would like to thank Professor Richard Schechner, whom I connected last December, and for a month I chased him over email for an interview. And unfortunately, he could not join us today. But we have 4 of his students and a very, very beautiful Guru Shishya Parampara. And they have been extremely helpful in arranging this session. We have Dr. Michelle Minek, who is an independent artist, scholar, somatic practitioner, and educator based in Baltimore, Maryland. She has been teaching and developing the performance workshop and Rasa boxes since 1999 and is co-editing and authoring the book. the Rasa Boxes source book inside Richard Schechner's performance workshop. She is currently developing her project Vital Matters, Baltimore, with the immersive performance company Submersive Productions. Over to you, Dr. Michelle Minek, and thank you so much for putting together this session.
Thank you so much, Aparna, and everyone at the Center for Soft Power who has helped to make this possible. We are all delighted to be here and feel very honored to be here in such esteemed company. I'm going to introduce the other panelists who are here with me. I'm also very grateful and delighted that they could all join me. They each have different experience and applications of rasa. And yeah, I'm just going to say a few words about each of them. And I don't know if you all can make yourselves visible and just wave when I say your name. Dr. Erin B. Mee is the author of Theater of Roots, Redirecting the Modern Indian State, and the editor of Drama Contemporary India. She worked with Kavalam Narayana Panikar at Sopanam, where she directed 2 productions. Her work on rasa focuses on the ways it is incorporated into site-based, immersive, and interactive theater in the US, England, Spain, and elsewhere. She is artistic director and founder of the New York-based This Is Not a Theater Company. Dr. Rachel Bowditch is a professor and theater director in the School of Music, Dance, and Theater in the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts at Arizona State University and is the coordinator of 8 theater graduate programs. She is author of 3 books and is co-editor and author of the Rasa Boxes sourcebook with myself and Paula Marie Cole. She has taught Rasa Boxes for 15 years at the graduate and undergraduate level nationally and internationally. And finally, Nisha Sajnani is the director of the program in Drama Therapy and Theater and Health Lab at New York University. She is the editor of Drama Therapy Review and author of Trauma-Informed Drama Therapy, 2014 to 2022, and Intercultural Drama Therapy, 2022. Nisha chairs the NYU Creative Arts Therapies Consortium and International Research Alliance, a collaborating center with the Arts and Health Program in the World Health Organization. Nisha and Erin are also both contributors to the Rasa Boxes source book, and I have worked with all of these amazing women, artists, and scholars, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to share today. Erin?
Thank you, Michelle. Let me just share my screen with all of you. I want to say that, hang on, let me just get that set up. I want to begin by thanking the organizers of this conference and the fantastic panelists. These presentations have been really amazing. It's an honor to share a Zoom screen with Dr. Subramaniam and Venuji. And I should say, I think, speaking, if we want to speak of Guru Shishya Parampara, my guru is not only Richard Schechner, but Kavalam Narayana Panikar, who first introduced me to the Natyashastra and Rasa. And I also want to say, I think there's a lot of question about scholarship, practitioners. I would argue that we're all scholar practitioners here. It certainly seems like it. So perhaps we should get rid of that idea that there's some kind of divide between a scholar and a practitioner. And I also want to say that I'm feeling grateful for the clarity with which all the previous panelists sort of set out notions of rasa. I'm really going to play with that and extend the idea of rasa in terms of experiential theater. So my company, This Is Not a Theater Company, produces experiential theater in swimming pools, on the Staten Island Ferry, in Manhattan apartments, in cafes in Avignon, in restaurants, on the subway, at dinner tables, in the dark, and yes, even in bathtubs. Experiential performances can be smelled, touched, and tasted, as Jivenu said. They're really multisensory, right? And they asked partakers to step into the performance and surround themselves with the event, to engage the sensorium, to relish every aspect of what they perceive, not just what they see and hear, but what they feel on their skin, what they taste on their tongue. By asking partakers to ingest, relish, internalize, and personalize the event, by engaging partakers as co-creators of the event, focusing on affect, and creating dramaturgical structures that allow partakers to savor and digest, experiential performances, I will argue, are inherently rasic. Our productions, having been influenced by my work with Kavalam Narayana Panikar in Kerala, who encouraged me to think about my theater making in terms of rasa, consciously create rasic experiences. In Cafe Play, performed in the back room of the historic Cornelia Street Cafe in Greenwich Village, partakers ordered food to accompany the play and ate and drank throughout the show, literalizing the notion of tasting the play. They were cast as customers in the restaurant. And the play asked us to think about the ways we treat other human beings. Do we behave with a sense of entitlement toward the waitstaff? Do we think about the slavery that is embedded in the sugar we stir into our coffee? Do we think about the politics of the coffee itself? Where, how, and by whom it is grown, and how it makes its way into our cup? Do we think about the class structures embedded in the way we use our silverware? Do we think about our speciesist responses to the cockroach on the floor? Cafe Play included the dance of chocolate, which I invite you to do now with me. If you've brought your chocolate or anything else that you can put in your mouth and suck on, this would be the moment.
Locate your chocolate, place it on your tongue, and let your tongue choreograph the dance of chocolate.
Close your eyes and let your tongue choreograph the dance of chocolate if you've put your chocolate in your mouth. I'm going to move, in the interest of time, I'll move forward. But many people who choreograph Dance of Chocolate for the first time have never thought about the possibility that a dance can take place in the mouth, or that the tongue can be a choreographer. They've never thought about tasting a dance. Versailles 2015, which you see, I hope, on your screen, was an immersive cocktail party focused on income inequality and privilege. It was set in an actual New York City apartment. Partygoers drank wine and ate hors d'oeuvres during a scene about gentrification in the living room. They ate cake in the kitchen as a drunk woman discussed the various kinds of food one can afford to consume as a member of the 1%, which includes, by the way, a $4,000 mango. Eating cake, an obvious reference to Marie Antoinette, was a way of positioning guests as members of the 1% and asking them to think about how they use their privilege. One reviewer wrote, "The overall tone helps the show maintain a sort of whistling past the guillotine balance between the obvious, yeah, we're privileged, so what, and the unsettling. But we, us in this room, not just the bankers, are actually living the kind of life that can bring about a revolution from its underclass, which should perhaps cause us more concern than it does." The fact that partakers were cast in the play, walked from room to room, interacted with others, and ate and drank led them to think about how they were implicated in the play's message. Rasa posits the interactive audience as co-creator of the event. After all the guests had arrived at a serious banquet, a dinner party modeled on the birthday event Pablo Picasso threw for painter Henri Rousseau in 1908 Paris, they participated in individual salon moments during which they painted with Picasso, were fed grapes and cheese by the three demoiselles d'Avignon, composed a poem with Max Jacob and a song with André Salmon. Then everyone sat down to dinner. Guests drew their own dinner plates on a paper tablecloth, and three-dimensional food was placed on their two-dimensional plates. During dinner, characters offered their birthday gifts to Rousseau in the form of a sculpture made of posed dinner guests by Picasso, a cabaret song by the Demoiselles d'Avignon, and poetry by Gertrude Stein. Critic Colin McConnell's ultimate understanding of the evening came from his interactions with the actor-character Henri Rousseau. During dinner, I was asked to give a birthday gift to Henri. My gift to him was possibility. He welled up with happiness, looked at me and asked, "Do you have a dream you've given up on?" I wasn't quite sure how to answer. "Not quite," was the best I could do. "Keep going. Don't ever give up. Keep dreaming," he said, and I will. So partakers and their experiences became an integral and essential part of the evening. In fact, they became what Gareth White calls the work's aesthetic material. Production and reception are intertwined. A production that includes the smell of chlorine, the taste of sugared coffee, and the movement of your body through space as an integral part of its meaning privileges the feeling body. Scholar Giovanni Colombetti's discussion of embodied experiential participatory sense-making in her book, The Feeling Body, can be put in conversation with rasa and with experiential performance to position rasa as an effective dimension of intersubjectivity, construed as an embodied or jointly enacted practice of participatory sense-making. Colombetti argues that skills such as imitation, along with the responsiveness to others' facial expressions and physical gestures, embody a pragmatic form of understanding others that is not based on internal simulation or mentalizing, but constitutes an embodied practice. She refers to this as participatory sense-making, which is enacted in the concrete interaction between two or more autonomous agents coupled via reciprocity and coordination, which I would argue also happens in film, or at least in certain films, or it can happen. An understanding between self and other involves empathy, which is, in Colombetti's view, an experiential access to the other's subjectivity, a feeling in. This opens up an understanding of rasa as a practice of empathy in performance. What happens when partakers experience a piece in which taste leads the experience rather than following or supporting text? In Theater in the Dark, Carpe Diem, which premiered in a workshop format at Loca Dormi in Kochi, partakers were blindfolded, led into a room with a clock ticking, and seated at a table with a velvet tablecloth. There they experienced an episodic piece that evoked the exquisite beauty of life through tastes and their pairings with sound, poetry, scent, and texture. There was no story. The piece was designed to evoke a desire to relish life while we can, carpe diem. Salt was paired with an ocean breeze created by fans and with the scent of green tea. Oranges were paired with a feather caressing the hand, a snippet of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and French perfume. Sage was paired with the smell of damp earth after rain and a love sonnet to the planet. Audiences were at a loss to describe what the piece was about, but they all said that it invited them to relish the present moment, which meant actually that they did understand it, but that they experienced what it was about rather than thinking about what it was about. One of the common conversation starters after a theater experience in the United States is, so what did you think? Theater in the Dark replaced this question with, how did the piece taste? What was its flavor? Or what did it evoke in you? Which initiates and invites a very different response, a response more in line with experiential theater and with rasa. And I don't have time today to talk about the relationship between rasa and sustainability, but if there's time in the question period, I would actually argue that rasa is more useful if we're going to think about a sustainable theatrical aesthetic. And by this, I mean climate change, rather than Aristotle's catharsis or anything from that, from the poetics. But I won't get into that now. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Erin. So I am going to just briefly give a little bit of background about the rasa boxes, which is the practice initiated by Richard Schechner that all of us on this panel have worked with to some extent. Not all of us actually learned it from Richard, but so I'm just going to share a little bit of the history, what it is and its applications before Rachel speaks about her use of it in productions in graduate and undergraduate contexts. So Richard Schechner had been working with and developing what I would call an approach to ensemble and performer training since the 1960s. He developed the sort of bulk of what we today call the performance workshop from the 1960s through the early 90s. And in 1996, which was the first experience that I had of the performance workshop, he introduced this exercise, the rasa boxes, which he'd been kind of playing with ideas for a number of years. He first was introduced to the Natyashastra and rasa and Indian performance culture and so on in 1971, also when he first learned a yoga sequence from Krishnamacharya that he has passed on to many generations of performers in the US. So initially, Richard's vision of the rasa boxes was as a psychophysical training tool for actors. And it is made up of a grid on the floor of 9 boxes. In the performance workshop, we use a lot of masking tape, so we make this grid with masking tape. And Shanta is always at the center, and the other 8 rasas from the Natyashastra are distributed around the outside of the grid, and the position of them changes frequently. There's no fixed position. And you might ask, people present here today might ask, since what I'm about to describe to you is about the physicalization of the emotional states associated with the rasas, why did we not call it, or why did Richard not call it the bhava boxes? My own sort of personal take on it is that it is the idea of rasa that is central to the practice and is the central thing that Richard was bringing from Indian context to people at the time, people in the United States. the idea, Dr. Subramaniam mentioned this being inside and outside at the same time, this sort of ability to be fully expressing, but also able to manage the emotional state that one is in, which is something that in a lot of particularly Stanislavski-based Western actor training is difficult for actors. So it's a training that enables people to develop a relationship to these 8 and 9, actually, states through breath, voice, shape of the body, movement, relationship, eventually text, character, work with objects, and it gets more and more complex eventually if you do it long enough, involving mixing and layering of rasas, and so on. And it's one of Richard's interests was this, he talks about it in terms of, in Artaud's terminology of the athleticism of an actor who can go from one full state to a completely different full state without having to do a whole lot of psychological working up or transitioning. So it's sort of this idea of, and the entire process, it is a training, but it's also a series of games. It involves a lot of play. It's improvisational. So actors are, we're looking, when we're facilitating this work, we're looking for certain recognizable, energetic, or qualities or physical cues that tell us, yes, this is Raudra and not Bibhatsa, for example. But the actor is really discovering their own dramaturgy around this, their own physical dramaturgy around this, and finding their own unique expressions for these things. And it also has an amazing ability, especially in the work once we introduce breath, to build a sense of group, a sense of ensemble. So in 1999, Paula Murray Cole and I started teaching the work, and then pretty quickly after that, teaching others to teach the work. And the teacher training has been via apprenticeship. We don't have yet, I don't know if we ever will, but we don't yet have a sort of certification program. It's really been this old-fashioned model of doing alongside, then learning to do, doing on your own, et cetera. There are currently 7 approved teachers of the work, and really what that means is that these people, myself and Rachel included, have learned the entirety of the performance workshop and can teach all of it. There are many qualified teachers of rasa boxes, particularly in the US and Brazil, where I started introducing the work in 2003. And its applications are now quite diverse, and it kind of keeps expanding. So it starts with theater, musical theater, television, K through 12 education, drama therapy. We're going to hear Nisha speak to that application, even landscape architecture. Both Rachel and I have had the very interesting experience of teaching rasa boxes to some Bharatanatyam different people, but Bharatanatyam teachers and students, medical doctors, and on and on. So, and I'm interested in bringing not just the rasa boxes, but the concept of rasa in terms of the Natyashastra, and also ideas and practices coming from Ayurveda into somatic work, and so on and so forth. So Rachel, I will pass it over to you to talk to us about your work at ASU.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be on this panel with all of you from around the world. I'm going to just share my screen here for a moment. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
All right. Growing up in Southeast Asia for 9 years, from the age of 7 to 16, in Indonesia for a year, and Singapore for 8 years, I was exposed to Southeast Asian performance traditions from a very young age. Wayang Kulit, Barong, Lagong, Kathakali, No, Kabuki, Bunraku, Bharatanatyam, among others. I was especially interested in physical theater and mask theater. Hold on, I'm trying to advance the slide here. Oops, this doesn't seem like it's allowing me to do that. 1 second. Hello? Can you, okay, sorry. For some reason, it's not allowing me to advance while I'm sharing.
Huh.
Okay. Okay, can you see that? I think I'll just keep it on this so that you can see that. Is that all right?
Okay.
Okay. I was especially interested in physical theater and mask theater, which led me to study with Anne Bogart and the City Company in 1996, studying Suzuki method and viewpoints at the Dell'Arte International School of Physical Theater and École de Jacques Lecoq in Paris from 98 to 99. I encountered Rasa boxes for the first time in 2003 as a master's student at New York University. And for me, all of the previous methodologies that I had learned were wonderful about time, space, the physical body, mask, externalization of the character. But when I encountered Rasa boxes for the first time, it was liberating. It was awakening. It was transformational. I found a safe container for entering into and out of emotional states, which I'll discuss later. Once I discovered this technique, Rasa boxes, I wanted to learn everything about the performance workshop and Rasa boxes and became an apprentice with Richard Schechner, Michelle Minnick, and Paula Murray Cole, taking every workshop, assisting, and working as an actor in Richard Schechner's second New York-based theater company, East Coast Artists. What I want to talk about here is how I incorporated Rasa boxes into undergraduate and graduate actor training here in the United States. When I joined ASU in 2006, I began to teach Rasa boxes at the undergraduate and graduate level within a course called Devising, as well as incorporating it into all my productions that I directed. Over the last 15 years, I have developed it into its own class called Rasa boxes. The class starts with yoga, breath work, and other mindfulness practices developed within the performance workshop. The students read a chapter on Bhava and Rasa in the Natyashastra, Emotions Revealed by Paul Ekman and Artaud, who called for actors to be athletes of the emotion. I bring in contemporary emotion science, in particular Candace Pert, who posits that emotions originate at the molecular level. I often begin the experience of Rasa with an orange exercise that Michelle Minnick introduced for students to have a somatic sensory experience of Rasa, or juice, flavor. The exchange of the emotion from the performer to the partaker. One one might smell or taste the different spices in a curry. So one opens up the orange, and that immediate infusion of the orange is sort of a somatic approach. As I introduce the Rasa in Sanskrit, I also provide some examples from contemporary emotion science, such as Karuna, sadness, the longest emotion, and Adbhuta, surprise, wonder, awe, as the shortest, and Bipatsa, discuss, as culturally specific, and a lot more other details as I go through. I think I just covered all of this. So students identify with words, phrases, and different relationships to Rasa. We could easily write anger, fear, sadness, English words into the Rasa boxes, but one of the benefits of using the actual Sanskrit words is it does create a distancing. It allows students to develop a new relationship with that word, to discover new possibilities. So I have them write on the floor, keep journals. Sorry, this is, I don't know why this is not showing. Keep journals. They explore each Rasa, drawing pictures, writing word associations. They draw them on the floor, and really to engage with a new relationship with each of these words. So what does Rasa and Rasa boxes open up for us here at actor training? So what I feel Rasa does is it helps develop emotional literacy. What Rasa and Rasa boxes open up for the young performer is a safe space to try on different emotional landscapes. Let's see if this works. To try on different emotional landscapes. Perhaps one that they have not yet experienced in actual life. It helps the actor performer to develop emotional literacy and emotional intelligence that they can then apply to a character that they're portraying. In theater, we traffic in human emotions and the human psyche. We ask young actors to put themselves into emotionally distressing and challenging roles. In plays, we ask them to play emotionally unbalanced characters where they themselves might be struggling with mental illness or personal imbalance. Some of the techniques in the theater are downright dangerous for the emotional health of the young actor, especially one who may be dealing with trauma. Rasa Boxes offers a safe container, a clear boundary, an on and an off switch that trains the actor to inhabit different psychological and emotional landscapes and safely jump in and out of them in a process of de-rolling. And I think Nisha will talk about that in the context of drama therapy later. As an athlete might on the field. So an athlete goes onto the field, they walk on, and when the whistle blows, go. They go from 0 to 100. There's no sauntering onto the field. It's an instant switch into, we're in go mode. And this technique trains the actor to be able to jump from emotional space to emotional space very quickly. Here we're training athletes to become athletes of the emotion in a mindful way that has a clear beginning, middle, and end. And the yoga and the breath work supports all of this. Oops, we saw that. I often end the Rasa Boxes class or rehearsal with all the performers entering Shanta, which is the center box, and imagining themselves standing under a waterfall, washing themselves of all the emotional energy that was conjured during class and returning to a state of balance before exiting the boxes. Film actors in particular have found the Rasa Boxes to be useful on set when they have to jump immediately into a highly emotionally charged scene and then jump off when the camera turns off and back in and off. 2 years ago, I had the privilege of having an MFA dancer, Shumana Mandala, who's a professional Bharatanatyam dancer, take my Rasa Boxes course. We had many amazing conversations about Rasa. And ultimately, as someone who had been studying Rasa since the time she was 9 years old, she found the Rasa Boxes to be liberating and freeing. She loved that she was able to experiment with Rasa in a way that was so codified for her in a new and experimental way. And since she has taken aspects of Rasa Boxes and has incorporated it into her training of young Bharatanatyam dancers here in Phoenix. And I also incorporate Rasa Boxes into my directing process and into all of, as sort of a foundational spine of all of the work that I do. So I begin by having actors discover their base rasas for their characters. So they might jump into Karuna or Raudra or Veera. For example, in A Doll's House, Nora's base rasa may be Bhayanika, fear, but she projects Veera or Shringara, right? So they're the rasa that's your base rasa and then the one that you project. They try on different rasas and then be able to take that base rasa through the other rasic states, like an artist might mix palettes on a canvas. I then also take every scene in the play through the Rasa Boxes, and we try it in different ways so the actors can jump into different boxes with the same words, with the same scene to find new relationships. And what that helps the actor do is find an emotional arc throughout the play. And for example, in Makinal, there's a scene where the protagonist, Helen, is being cross-examined by a lawyer. And at first, the impulse was to play it very sort of angry and more in a space of Raudra. But we started to play the scene in Hasya, which became about mockery and mocking at. And it ultimately gave the scene a lot more texture and nuance. Another exercise that is developed through the performance workshop created by Richard Schechner is this exercise called slow motion crossing. And we do the slow motion crossing in the rasa boxes. So the actors dress themselves from head to toe in their characters' costumes, not ones created by the costume shop, but ones that they found themselves. And they proceed to take 2 to 3 hours to cross through the space, following a performance topography that they have created. And the goal is to have encounters with the characters as they go along, and ultimately to move through these rasic states at a glacial pace and really tapping into the rasas on a molecular level. There's a lot of different breakouts where the actors can break out of the slow motion, but it's a very intense, deep psychophysical exercise, and possibly one of my favorites in terms of having the actors create a sense memory, a term that Stanislavski uses, but for the actors to create an emotional landscape that they can then later use on the stage. There's something wrong with my computer. Sorry, I'm going to, can you see that? Okay, the computer was working perfectly. I can't seem to advance. Okay. So ultimately, what all of this training does is allow for the actors to have a rich rasic encounter that then they can share with the audience. And ultimately, the rasa boxes offer a palette, a lens through which any performance medium can be explored in a safe yet rigorous way. As Michelle Minnick mentioned, you could take Shakespeare, clown, commedia, dance, opera, any number of things. All right, I can't for some reason seem to stop sharing here, but that is what I have for you. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Of course, I'm having technical difficulties, sorry.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Nisha?
Hello, thank you, Michelle, Erin, Rachel. Thank you, Dr. Subramaniam, for the tremendous insights and lectures offered so far. So I'm going to discuss with you the use of rasa boxes in the context of drama therapy, which is the distillation of theater-based processes to promote well-being, increase vitality, and to address specific concerns like anxiety or depression. And even more specifically in the context of training therapists, including drama therapists. And drama therapists, like any other arts therapists, rely on an aesthetic frame in their practice. We assume that we, as aesthetic beings who take in the world through all of our senses, are engaged in self-expression all of the time, but that this expression in many contexts is limited to written and verbal discourse and is highly compartmentalized, highly managed in our everyday social interactions. And this is also true about the context of actor training, as I've experienced it as a child studying Bharatanatyam on Saturdays and ballet on Tuesdays in Edmonton, Alberta, which was at the time a predominantly white, though increasingly multicultural city in Canada, and in the context of therapy. So the performance of healing has been expressed, of course, in many forms. Since the advent of psychoanalysis, this particular performance often comes to mind with a somewhat removed or neutral-looking therapist and patient who is encouraged to let their minds wander and reflect on the images and ideas that arise. Though this image has changed with the popularization of the human potential movement, at least in a Western American context, and it's focused on the mind and body, the growth of group psychotherapy and its reliance on relationship and emotional expression, wherein the therapist plays a more facilitative role, and towards somatic and mindful approaches to care, which value an attunement to sensation, temporality, and relies on a more empathic partnership, a partaking that I think comes closer to rasic ideals. But of course, all of this has been in a context, in a neoliberal context, which has steadily reinforced the role of the individual devoid of cultural, historical, political, gendered, racialized, or social context. And I offered that footnote because speaking about therapy, like acting, comes with its own baggage and power dynamics, and we don't have much time to unpack all of that baggage here, but it is in this context which I have been training students to use their love of theater to engage in performances of care. And I've adopted Richard Malika's perspective that the work of psychotherapy involves a shared empathic partnership between two or more people working together in a community to create a new worldview, or what I've been referring to as a therapeutic solidarity. It's an embodied practice, or to use Erin's reference, a participatory sense-making. I really like that framing, and we'll follow up on it a little bit later. So therapists, like actors, in the words of Artaud, must train to be athletes of the heart in order to come into contact with their own emotional geography and to be able to imagine, attune, and join others in the context of therapy. In that context, we call this the Therapeutic Alliance, which is the relationship that has been demonstrated to be the most significant factor in whether therapeutic work will have a positive outcome. You know, think about the last time that you ever went to a healer of any kind, a dentist, a doctor, a therapist, or somebody else for care. We tend to pick up very quickly if something feels off and either suppress that feeling and tolerate the encounter, or we don't go back, assuming that it's our choice, of course. So similarly, it's very easy for therapists to be warm and caring towards a motivated, disclosing, or cooperative person than one who is aggressive or inconsistent. So the challenge for therapists becomes about how to be with another human being in their most difficult moments over time. In a way, it's our challenge as human beings. How do we be with others over time? In the ups and the downs, in our most challenging and difficult moments? How do we savor a relationship together over time? So I introduced Rasa boxes early on in the training of drama therapists for several reasons. It expands, first of all, it expands their imaginal, physical, and emotional literacy and their repertoire, their physical and emotional and imaginal repertoire. It offers practice with the Sanchari Bhavas, the crossings between these spaces. It allows us to explore the nuances between them. It offers practice with stepping into and stepping out of emotionally charged and saturated spaces. Rachel spoke about de-rolling, which is a term we often use in drama therapy to talk about not only stepping into role, but the process by which one actually steps away and out of a particular space. And that could refer to the professional roles that we're called into in everyday life, like now being called into the role of speaker, but in a moment I'm going to go and pack for the hurricane that is coming to New Haven, and I will step into a different role entirely. And we do that all the time, right? Teacher to mother, to friend, to sister, and the nuances and the crossings in between. Sometimes we get stuck in a moment and we find it very difficult to step back from the anger we may feel, the deep anxiety or grief that we may be filled up with as a result of loss, which is all too common these days. The worry we might feel about the climate, as I am now anticipating this hurricane. We also do this work to be able to cultivate aesthetic distance, which Dr. Subramaniam and Michelle referred to earlier, being able to engage in a state fully while also being able to maintain some part of ourselves that is able to reflect upon it. In drama therapy, we would refer to that as aesthetic distance, this capacity to both feel and think and to be present with what we are doing. And also as a means of practicing self-care. Rachel spoke to this a moment ago. So when we lay out the grid in the classroom and students are experiencing different exercises within the Rasa box structure, I'll do a specific exercise. Well, I'll invite them to divide into two. One group will be stepping in and out of different rasic spaces, 8 of them, and the others will be standing in the middle. And they'll just track for themselves where they are drawn. Who are they drawn to join? And to try joining them in whichever space they might be in, and then to move to somebody else and to somebody else, and to notice, of course, the opposite. Where are they finding it difficult to join another person? And then ultimately to come in the middle, to notice themselves, to notice others, and to see if they can find a space of equilibrium. Just like engaging in private practice or working in a hospital system, one is called into fully emotionally charged spaces, but one also has to let that go. And in between people, in between clients, in between group sessions, find a way to come back to a sense of presence and a sense of calm for oneself. Others might refer to this as self-care. It's another term we might use. How do you cultivate a sense of attunement to oneself so that one can care for others? And where else have I taken this? So I'm just taking a quick look at my notes here. So there's the work of using Rasa boxes to train drama therapists. I collaborated with a colleague in Bangalore by the name of Maitri Gopalakrishna about how Rasa theory and practice could be further situated in drama therapy. And she had trained for a time with Adi Shakti, which is a theater company in Mumbai led by Vinay Kumar, who describes their company's approach as a combination of Kuriyatam, Ayurveda, Kalari Payatu, Tantra, and certainly ideas drawn from the Natyashastra. And what is particularly different about this approach is that they will focus on particular muscular patterns and breath patterns and train actors to adopt those. And so it's a very outside-in kind of training versus the kind of training that I've been exposed to most, and certainly how I'd been oriented to the Rasa box structure, which invites projections of my own personal associations to discrete spaces, and then relational associations to those spaces, and then ultimately collective associations to spaces as we work in a group. And my collaboration with Maitri called up some terrific questions, I think, about the place of skill and the place of training in the context of training therapists, but also in terms of how we approach the use of Rasa boxes itself. It also opened up questions about the use of Sanskrit language in each of these spaces. The way that I was exposed to Rasa boxes involved the use of Sanskrit language to describe each of these different spaces, and I let that go after a while, especially as I noticed that I started to become a little bit more worried about whether that was exotifying the language. And, in conversations I had with other practitioners, like Michelle, for example, we talked about the use of Sanskrit as a means of distancing participants from their immediate associations to particular states. But that gets complicated, especially when I started doing this work in Bangalore and working with students who absolutely understood the roots of these words and could definitely associate immediately to anger. Or to any of the other emotional states written in Sanskrit. So that's a question that I'll just leave here in terms of the use of language and how we've adopted it in this particular structure. I've also worked with another woman by the name of Suprita Aital, who's a dance movement therapist who has been taking the Natyashastra and the concept of the various terminology and adopting it for dance movement therapy, and she's added greatly to the kind of work that we're able to do in a therapeutic context. And I suppose finally I'll just say that the way that we've been using this in therapy particular, not just for the training of therapists, but in the context of therapy, is to facilitate emotional regulation and to develop biographical performance, where participants will associate sounds and substances and images and words with each of these different spaces, and then start to create their own story. So the space will give birth to a memory, to a story which they will then narrate and then work with a partner to explore on the topography of the Rasa box structure. And then I'll invite them to switch with their partner so that their partner enacts what they heard the other say and take on various physical postures that the teller originally explored in their telling to deepen their insights and extend the narrative. And I'll pause there with my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. Let's see. Is there a way I can pin myself here? Okay. I'm not seeing myself currently on the screen. Hopefully we'll see when I go to screen share, we'll see that, and you can let me know if not. Okay, this has been a lot of information. I just feel like, could everybody just take a moment to just shake? I'm going to punctuate this talk with a few moments of somatic intervention. So my presentation follows on Nisha's in part because I'm kind of moving in a territory that's somewhere between performance and therapeutic practice and community building and activism. And the big question for me and my work at present, the core question of Vital Matters, is how do we move from self-care to care of the earth, and an understanding that those two things are inextricable. So how do I move from my body to the body of the earth, and how can that relationship fortify my vision of where and how to move forward in relation to this time of climate chaos that we're living in. It's very of this moment that we're in, that Nisha's next role is to be packing to get away from a hurricane. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Let's see if this works. There we go. Can someone just let me know if you can see?
Yes, we can see.
Excellent, thank you. Why do I not? There we go. Okay. So over the past number of years, as I've been moving more and more into climate change being kind of the organizing reality for what I'm doing as an educator and an artist and a researcher, rasa has become also more and more of an organizing principle and set of practices, and it's sort of seeping into everything that I do. So I'm looking at it in performance and everyday life as a support for activism, because its relational nature enables us not only to confront and work with difficult material, while also helping to connect people with one another. It is a lens for exploring all the aspects of this material and for releasing into the flow of all emotions rather than getting stuck in any one state or viewpoint. You know, people tend to get stuck in anxiety, fear, or there's just like a shutting out of the realities around us. So how can we stay present to our own emotions, and how can we experience and understand that as being about kind of connecting our own juices to the juices of the planet and all of the species that we interact with, rely upon for sustenance, etc. It's a way of balancing the soma and the nervous system. I think Nisha definitely already addressed some of these things. And particularly a way of staying connected to pleasure. This was, for me, one of the most important things that I learned when I was first introduced to rasa by Richard many years ago was this idea of the centrality of pleasure in performance. And that's true in actor training, that it's something, actor training is something that sometimes needs to be infused more with that and performing. But in this case, you know, as we are engaging with difficult realities and ideas about those realities, how do we still stay connected to pleasure? And for me, it's becoming a lot about specifically staying grounded in taste and smell, which in Ayurveda relate to the elements of water and earth. And I, in the workshop production of Vital Matters that I did at Kennesaw State University in 2019, we would start every rehearsal with people crossing, this is a part of the performance workshop, crossing a line that kind of separates the everyday life from our workspace and our performance space. And I just would leave a collection of bottles of essential oils at the center of the room. And the students, I was working with 8 students on this project, and the students would come and they would smell them, they would maybe, you know, put them on themselves. And it was like a way of transitioning into the sort of combination of everyday and natya. And this is something I'm curious to have a conversation about, because for so many years, this idea that there was a universe that was a universe of natya, which was a very freeing way to think about entering into an emotional state in this kind of parallel universe that wasn't necessarily personal to me, although it might have personal connections. And now I'm working in ways that are about a mixing of the natya, the universe of natya and the universe of the everyday.
Michelle, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So we're just running a little behind time. Can we close around sometimes?
Can what? Sorry.
Can we finish the session a little early if it's possible, because we've run out of time. I'm so sorry to interrupt in between.
Okay, so you want me to just stop?
If you can just conclude what you're saying. Thank you.
I can't, I mean,
I'm sorry, Michelle.
That was the beginning, so.
Yeah.
I can just show you these images real quickly. And the last thing I would ask everyone do is just take a big breath. And then on the exhale, and again. And one more time. Thank you.
Prakash?
You know, I must admit that it was really fascinating, and I'm really like curious on where that would have gone. What Michelle had started. You know, I just have one question to Michelle. I just want to ask her because of the nature of this group. I want to take an example from a play that I saw maybe 10 or 12 years ago in New York. It was a sort of musical called Next to Nothing, I think it was called. And there's this character who is kind of distraught, and she has very low self-esteem. And she goes to meet a psychiatrist, and who is of Asian origin, Indian, if I'm not mistaken, next to normal. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's right. And she's when she talks to she has a momentary crush on this, Asian psychiatrist. So when he talks, he sings like a rock star to her. Now, at that moment, the audience who is very involved with this woman character, who begin to empathize with her, they laugh when that happens. But the thing is, as Dr. Subramaniam said earlier, that Sthai Bhava is what generates rasa. The thing is, the audience, when they laugh, it's laughter with tears. It's actually the rasa they're feeling is karuna, not hasya. Now the thing is, when you do actors training, do you think this is a product of training, or how much is this a product of training with the kind of fascinating experiments you've been trying, and how much do you think is just instinct? I'm asking that question as a provocation because I'm curious to know how you think about this.
Was that a question to everyone, or?
Yeah, to you specifically, actually.
I'm not sure I quite follow. I followed you up to the audience is having a different rasic response. It's not the same as the bhava that the performer might be expressing.
No, I want to say it differently. See, the thing is, when she feels this crush on him, that is expressed actually from her state of mind, because you understand that he's of course not singing. It's the state of mind that makes it seem like that, and the audience understands that state of mind that she's in. So although it's a comical moment in the narrative, it's karuna. What they feel is empathy for her. Does an actor understand this from training? Can they understand this from training alone, or do you need some sort of instinct to be able to grasp this?
I'm still having trouble. Understand what specifically? I'm sorry.
Do you mean personal life experience of the situation?
No, see, when you're watching a play and you get a moment that seems comical, you understand actually it's a painful moment for the character, and you feel the pain, even though you laugh. When you're sitting in the hall, you may laugh at that moment, but what you feel is actually the person's pain. Now, to be able to achieve that kind of moment, do these experiments help? Okay, that's my question.
I would open it. I would open that question to anyone here, but I think that I haven't thought about it before, so I don't know. Like, I know what you're talking about in terms of an actor who grasps that, and I think of that kind of actor as a really intelligent and nuanced actor, and an actor who's probably really good at doing comedy, because in comedy, you can't play the comedy. You have to play the real situation and the real stakes, right? So, but a really good comic actor will have that inside outside thing where they can be in the character, and as the actor being aware of whether they're landing the part of it that's comical. The things that comes to my mind actually is this Brazilian director and teacher who does a lot of training of clown work, specifically for clowns in hospitals, but just also clown work in general. She's writing an article for the book, and she talks about how they really expected that hasya was going to be a very core and important rasa for them to explore in clown work, and it was the opposite. It was like, no, we leave that alone. It will come from really investing in these other spaces, right? So I think this is what you're describing is an extension of this in-out. It's a specific instance of being in and out in a certain way in comic circumstances.
And I would also add that in much Western theater training, you hear the phrase, do not work directly on the emotion or it'll seem false, right? A lot of Stanislavski training mentions that. However, I would argue that if you don't have emotional literacy and you don't study the landscape of the emotions, how are you going to be able to navigate that? It's understanding that sort of spectrum of emotions. And I found that actors, and myself included, who've been working on it for 15 years, my own emotional literacy as a human being, as it relates to me as a human, has become much more nuanced through this practice that then as a performer, I can apply into performance. And that we begin to talk about all the shades of the emotion that an actor can draw from. So the actor can know I'm playing a Karuna moment, or the actor is in Karuna, is in sadness, and yet the audience is experiencing it as a funny moment, right? But the actor is very conscious of what is going on there. And the more I found that actors have an understanding and have an emotional literacy, the better, because I also think that we throw a lot of actors into very emotionally unsafe spaces. You know, if you are a young actor who has trauma, who has maybe experienced a sexual assault, and we ask them to play someone like, you know, Blanche Dubois, who's mentally unstable, we're throwing them into a very unsafe space. And I think that this training allows actors to find a sense of balance within themselves, maybe not completely, but to be able to then take on the emotional imbalance of a character, like in Next to Normal. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I feel that it helps with the emotional literacy. I saw a thing about Lee Strasberg, and he's asking an actor, do you have a child? No. Okay, does your friend have a child? Yes. Imagine that child has been murdered. Experience that, you know, and like imagine what it would be like to actually lose a child. And I don't feel like that is a safe space. And we talked about this a lot in our Rasa Boxes conversations, is a lot of that training is very emotionally depleting and enters into very unsafe spaces, maybe from a drama therapy standpoint. And Rasa, in a way, fills it up with something juicy and something robust and something healthy that they can jump in and out of, rather than leaving the actor feeling depleted and drained. How many actors do you know, have entered into Heath Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, have entered into some very dangerous emotional spaces that they can't get out of, right? Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. Vijay?
Yes, maybe one more question. Or I think maybe you should sum it up because we are at 8:40 already.
You know, I don't know. I think it's a great thing that we could do this conversation. Maybe we should do more of this because you know, it's completely fascinating how we approach you know, these ideas of performance from different cultures, because you know, it's not just, I don't believe that anyone can claim an autonomous self. We all have ethnocentric selves in some ways, or many ways, or essentially that. I feel that there's a meditative quality about performance, where the person who is performing can witness both the performance he or she is doing, playing the character, and also the effect it is having on an audience. And they can course correct as they go on with the performance. And I think all these training methods, these experiments, the theories of performance that we have, all lead us to this one single word, I think, and that is empathy. And to be able to bring the pain of existence or the problems of existence, you know, what we in Sanskrit we call dharma sankata, because we are always running out of time. We always have limited resources, and there are too many demands on our both resources and time. And you have to pick something over the other, and it's always a very difficult decision to make. And I think these exercises of aesthetics actually give us a finer balance in judging exactly how to live, perhaps. Maybe I'm just giving too much value to the idea of performance, but I think in these desperate times, I'm just fascinated that somebody is able to make a link between thinking performance and climate change, for instance. We always seem to think it's somebody else's problem, that you can outsource this problem to somebody to solve. And it's not, and it's an existential problem. And I think a way of dealing with it may be possible because of some of these experiments that are happening. I certainly would like to participate in one of these, if possible, sometime in future. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for letting me share the space with you.
Adhwaka, is there anything you'd like to say? You have to unmute.
I just want to congratulate the organizers for this wonderful experience. This has been a rasa for me. This itself has been a rasa. I've been a rasika. Listening to all of you, your experience really came out in your deliberation. And I think as Dr. Belwadi said, we must have more such interactions, meaningful interactions. And I'm sure much more can be achieved. In spite of the pandemic, all of us have come together today, thanks to technology, and thanks to the very idea that was mooted by Vijay Lakshmi, in bringing us all together. One thing is absolutely sure, we're able to see that the Indian soft power seems to be quite a powerful power, because it has reached so many of you. The physical distance has already been dissolved. Thank you all so much for the wonderful time you gave me. And Vijay Lakshmi, thank you for making me part of this wonderful gathering. We'll have more such gathering.
Dr. Michelle, we are sorry that we had to kind of, cut short your talk, but I guess in the interest of having this conversation together, we had to do that. And we look forward to maybe we do something like this, exclusively only about rasa, and do a whole day workshop or two when you all come to India. Hopefully we can do it in the real world. Otherwise, we'll do one more virtually, maybe a couple of months down the line.
I would also love to tell Vijay Lakshmi that our institution, named after Bharata Ilango Foundation for Asian Culture, will be very happy to collaborate with you, and we can bring such people who can really contribute like how it happened today, but maybe for a longer duration, and not in one evening, at least 2 evenings, I think we will need.
Yes. And I must say that the Rasa box part of this, Aparna has worked very hard to see that, everybody came together. So Arunima, over to you.
So much, Akka. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this evening and for morning in some of you. It has been a truly fascinating conversation. We've had a day-long conversations, in fact, on Rasa, when we started with cinema in the morning, to Natyashastra, to aesthetics, to Rasa box. And there's a lot of food for thought for everybody to take away with them. With that, I'd like to particularly also thank Prakash Ji for staying and moderating the sessions. I'll quickly announce the sessions for tomorrow. We have a session on Indian food, curry and beyond in the morning. Do join us for that. And in the evening, we have a session on Indian cosmology. Please do sign up for that as well. The links have been provided in the chat box. With that, thank you once again. Namaste.
With your permission, we'll be ending the meeting now. Namaskar.